PYE P177 1954. This is the documentation of the experience of a hobby project, available in video and in written form, made with the hope that it could be helpful to others. But any comment that could help me to improve my practice is welcome and appreciated. This radio was found in Italy, donated by a friend who inherited it from his father. This model was manufactured in England, and this radio set must have been sold in Tanganyika from a shop that had two addresses, one in Moshi and the other one in Russia. This radio model mounts rimlock socket vacuum tubes, which have been used mostly in Europe during the early 1950s. Like other similar PYE radio chassis, also this model has a fairly complicated system of dial cords. Under the chassis, everything seems to be intact. All the soldering points are marked with a red color, and none of them seems to have been altered. The power transformer, as well as the output transformer, are sealed with tar, which stained everything inside the chassis. Unfortunately, also the coil cores have been blocked with tar, which might make further alignments difficult or impossible. Many resistors seem to have suffered from excessive heat. Most of the film capacitors are externally broken. Before going any further, after resolving a minor issue with the power switch, the radio is tested, but with no success. Considering the condition of the chassis, the extension of the damaged components, and the way that the components have been mounted on different layers under the chassis, it seems wise to just dismantle and rebuild the radio completely. However, there are no reliable schematics for this model, only those of similar ones. At the New Zealand vintage radio site, the model PZ69 is chosen as a reference. The radio is slowly dismantled then, comparing everything with the schematics available and writing down the actual component map under the chassis. The schematic diagram of the model PZ69 is modified accordingly, with the exception of the tone module and of the tuning module. They are slightly different from those in the PZ69, but the reverse engineering seems to be impossible due to the complexity of the rotary switches used. In the modified schematic diagram, the areas delimited with a green dotted line are part of the mentioned modules. To give more meaning to the schematics, a simplified version is written, including only pickup and broadcast band, with the first tone selection. In this version, also the component values are visible. All the components are removed from the chassis. The connections of the band selection module, as well as those of the tone module, are carefully labeled. The tube sockets and any other part are separated from the bare chassis iron. The chassis is cleaned from rust, paint residues and tar, soaking in vinegar for 24 hours. It is then cleaned with steel wool and washed in the dishwasher. Immediately after the treatment, it is sprayed with zinc paint. Then the rebuilding process can begin. The rebuilding process takes into account the different form factors of the new components. For example, the capacitor C31 is now part of the tone selection module, and the electrolytic capacitors are distributed in a more convenient location. Also, a couple of fuses are added. At this stage, the radio is tested, but only one or two very faint stations could be received. Initially, the wrong hypotheses are made. The first three tubes are replaced with new ones, obtaining only a slight improvement. The intermediate frequency transformers are checked, finding that there was something not perfectly soldered, but still without resolving the problem. Out of despair, the band selection switch module is washed in the dishwasher, but still without achieving the expected result. While remounting the band selection switch module, the connection to the pickup is omitted, showing another slight improvement in the reception. Later, this connection will remain open to keep this improvement, considering that input port will never be used. Finally, the culprit is found. The connection marked with a dotted line on the schematic diagram was missing. The experience described in the previous section obliges one to observe that the pickup input, instead of being connected to the audio preamplifier tube, is sent to the grid of the oscillator section in the mixer tube. Apparently, when the pickup input is selected, the oscillation is inhibited, and that section of the tube type ECH42 becomes an additional preamplifier stage, which then feeds the audio preamplifier. In this radio, tar has been used by the factory to lock the cores in the coils. It was possible to move only the intermediate frequency transformer coils to tune them to 470 kHz, heating them up with a hot air gun. But the same technique cannot be applied to the oscillator and antenna coils because the plastic would melt, as the picture shows. This makes it impossible to align properly the dial scale and the tracking between oscillator and antenna section. Anyhow, the radio can now work sufficiently well. This radio model includes a magic eye which originally would not be separable from the chassis. Considering that it is possible to detach the magic eye tube without interfering with the operability of the radio, it seems to be appropriate to put a connector for that. Some automotive spade connectors are used in this case. This radio has a quite sophisticated dial cord system, which includes the tuning, the tone, and band selection. The documentation coming from the model PYE-69 is good, but here are the steps for rebuilding it shown in a more gradual way. First of all, it is necessary to consider what will be called dial shuttle, which is a detached element with two pulleys that has to travel horizontally. This component has two hooks where the first two cords should be attached. Before going any further, it must be verified that the variable capacitor can be completely turned and that the shuttle travels accordingly from end to end. Secondly, there is the dial indicator cord that travels through the shuttle pulleys. The dial indicator would be attached on top of this cord between the two pulleys. Finally, there are the tone and band indicator cords controlled by the respective knobs. For the item under restoration, nylon fishing line has been used. Testing the radio in its cabinet, after some hours of satisfactory radio play, nothing could be heard anymore right after some significant noise from the loudspeaker. It was the final amplifier tube. Testing the tube, it appeared that, even though there were no apparent shorts and no signs of gas poisoning, the heater was drawing too much current without becoming red. The tube was clearly worn out, but the behavior of the heater was unusual. In the end, all the remaining original tubes are replaced with new ones, especially the Magic Eye.
Circulated that 340 leaders have declined President Biden's phone call. Secretary of State Blinken said the wholesale speech was counterfeit.
3 years later, the radio still receives very well in a wide range of the shortwave band, and it is a pity that the received frequency cannot be read accurately from the dial scale because it cannot be aligned. Therefore, an RF buffer is added with the purpose of making available the frequency of the local oscillator to an external frequency counter. This is the schematic diagram and plan using a common general-purpose perforated board. The board is installed on the shield, separating the band selection switch from the rest of the radio using 2 standoffs. The input of the RF buffer is connected using a shielded cable to the plate of the oscillator section. Tube type ECH42. Unfortunately, the signal from the local oscillator is extremely strong in the medium wave band, and the RF buffer amplifies too much in this case, including harmonics that would confuse the frequency counter. Anyway, for all the other bands it works very well, and the issue is considered acceptable. This clip shows that below 1300 kHz, the frequency counter shows a higher value instead. Here is a view under the chassis after this last amendment. The test is done in the evening, starting from the last shortwave band corresponding to the highest receivable frequencies for this radio and ending with the medium wave band. Initially, the antenna input is connected to an external wire, while in the end, only for the medium wave band, an internal loop antenna is used for filtering out the common domestic electrostatic noise.
et mondiaux selon la consultante Fangy Walker.
Well, I think Chinese wine is always going to be quite niche.
Je pense que le vin chinois restera toujours un produit de niche, car par rapport à la production mondiale de vin, le vin chinois est très peu important.
Tienen que estar cuando te imaginas una competición a nivel continental. Claro, uno piensa en Euroliga.
Outside our understanding China.
There is one problem with China, is we think about China. Quand nous pensons à la Chine, nous pensons bien manufacturé. Nous ne considérons pas la Chine comme une source de produits agricoles. Certains pays comme la France sont très à la pointe dans le... Doit ne pas être très cher. Ce que nous devons, c'est vraiment construire des restaurants chinois de haute gastronomie.
dalili shine gwamnati ta ga alamar cewa ana samun irin kasashe da suke tasowa.
Pero no, ni equipo de ya en los equipos Champions, ni equipo de baloncesto.
Prévu aujourd'hui. 我是将定的。
是réservé le billet.
中国杂技是世界一流的。
L'acrobatie chinoise est la meilleure du monde.
مرتبطا لأن تكون أكثر جدية مع ابنتهم فقط إن لم تساعديها سأحرمك من مشاهدة برامج الأطفال. You're watching, so get straight to it, guys. With me.
À la prochaine.
The next day, this is the sign of too much, so consider reducing your step and count by like 500.
Schematico? Dove vai il peso? Schematico? Dove ti sarà salvo? Music Radio 人気なのだ。Music Taxi
demonstriert Leistung. Präsident Johnson ist wieder in Untersuchungshaft gekommen. Das Bezirksgericht Seoul-Zentral erließ kurz nach 2 Uhr am Donnerstag einen Haftbefehl gegen den abgesetzten Präsidenten. Das Gericht hielt die Möglichkeit der Vernichtung von Beweismitteln durch Juden für sehr wahrscheinlich. Die mögliche Beweisvereitelung war die entscheidende Begründung im Antrag der Sonderermittler für einen Haftbefehl gegen ihn.
For the medium wave band, the frequency counter becomes unreliable. Therefore, it is turned off.
La pressura.
Информации пострадавших нет.
Ante los vaivenes comerciales de Trump, el índice que más gana hoy es el Dow Jones. Las porcentuales, sí.
Ukrán részről az lenne a legjobb, hogyha vállalnák a felelősséget.
Az ukrán állam nem tesz érdemi lépéseket, hogy megszüntesse a toborzó tisztek által alkalmazott erőszakot. Ez egy újabb szint mutat.
The frequency counter appearing in this project was made using a ready-made module capable of measuring frequencies between 100 kHz and about 60 MHz, with the possibility of adding or subtracting an intermediate frequency value, operating with 2 programming push buttons. However, this frequency counter module requires a signal of a significant amplitude. Therefore, a preamplifier was built, like this schematic diagram and plans show. However, for obtaining the most out of the two transistors, in place of the resistors R2 and R4, two multichurn trimmers of 200 kilo ohms were used and set to the point of maximum gain of the preamplifier.